Hello and welcome to our Literacy Love series brought to you by the CLIU 21. Today we're going to talk about comprehension strategies that work. My name is Emily Killian and I work here as a TAC at the Carbon-Lehigh Intermediate Unit. I wanted to welcome you and let you know that all teachers are welcome today, and hopefully no matter what grade you teach or the age of your students, you'll be able to find a little something to walk away with today and put into your toolbox. Let's get started. This is the definition that I'll be basing our conversation on today. What is comprehension? Comprehension is a complex task that involves a range of language and cognitive processes and skills that students must master in order to make sense of a written text. It is a complex task. We all know that. But how do we teach those strategies so that our students can master them? Comprehension does not stand alone, as we can see when we're looking at Scarborough's reading rope. This rope is a frequently seen and used conceptual model that shows how kids become skilled readers. If we specifically look at the language comprehension portion, which we see at the top, we'll find those comprehension strands. And the strategies I'll talk about for the next half hour or so will be focused up here in that top portion. But remember and keep in mind that all of the strands need to be active and interwoven for a student to be a skilled reader. Students have to be able to both recognize the words, pull them off the page, and also comprehend what the words are conveying for them to be considered a skilled reader. This is Dr. Daniel T. Willingham. He earned his PhD in cognitive psychology from Harvard and spent nearly a decade focusing on how the brain learns and commits information to memory. Today, his research is focused on the cognitive psychology behind K-12 education and college students, including how students learn, and more importantly, the main focus of today, the effectiveness of different reading comprehension strategies. While Willingham has done much research, there have been many others who are also interested in reading comprehension strategies. In fact, this very topic has been the focus of more than 500 studies, and that statistic is from 2007, so we can assume that by now many more have taken place. And in short, teaching reading strategies does improve reading comprehension. Yay! Wouldn't it be great if it was just that simple? There are a few really difficult questions that we have when it comes to reading comprehension strategies. Some of those are figuring out how the strategies work, how much time we should spend on teaching them, if all students benefit from reading comprehension strategies, and which ones are the most effective. Luckily, Willingham has dug deep into these questions and he's able to offer us some answers. For the sake of time, today I'll forego the answers to those first few questions and really kind of zone in on that last question of which strategies are found to have evidence of effectiveness. I also hope to leave you with a few helpful hints and/or resources that you can use in your classroom to implement the scientifically proven effective strategies. I do want to take just a moment here to point out that I've been referring to today's topic as reading comprehension strategies rather than comprehension skills. That's a deliberate word choice because there is a difference between comprehension skills and comprehension strategies. Today, we're going to be talking about strategies, which are the intentional, not automatic, things that a reader does to stay focused on what they are reading and making meaning of comprehension. Comprehension strategies include things like summarization, Not the ability to write a summary, but the use of actually summarizing as a technique for understanding what you've read. When an effective student is reading a really hard or challenging text, they may stop and occasionally sum up the text in their mind. Doing that helps them develop a clearer understanding of the text. Strategies like monitoring, questioning, and thinking about text organization are all intentional, purposeful actions that effectively help kids recall and comprehend what they read. These strategies don't necessarily improve the ability to answer specific kinds of questions like what's the main idea or what are the supporting details. Strategies are things that kids do when they read to help them comprehend the text. And we know that teaching kids to use strategies rather than skills will give them a much better chance at becoming skilled readers. I'll start by saying that while many studies have been done, the studies that have been time and time again studied on specific reading strategies do tend to yield more positive results. For instance, we have a lot more data on students generating questions than we do on students using mnemonic devices. There's a whopping 27 studies about questioning compared to a mere 2 about mnemonic devices. Therefore, we have a lot more data that indicates that question generation is an effective reading strategy. Our data is inconclusive on mnemonics, not negative. We're not saying that they don't work. We just haven't studied them enough. We also have research that leads us to the understanding that reading comprehension strategies are most well received by students who have mastered or show fluency in their reading. Typically, this happens around 4th grade. So while we still need to be reading aloud to our young learners and practicing comprehension strategies with our little learners, we know that students in 4th grade and above will get the most benefit from practicing using these strategies independently while reading. So if you don't hear me mention something today that you're doing in your classroom, or you don't teach 4th grade or above, please don't worry. It might just not be one of the 4 strategies that I have chosen to mention today. And the strategies that I do talk about today are just the ones that have been researched on all grade levels and are proven to be effective. I also want to remind you that I do value each of you as professionals and creators and educators. And I know that you're doing many amazing, productive things in your classrooms. So if there's something I missed that's working really well for you, please reach out to me, talk to me about it, and I can hopefully learn from you and then hopefully share your strategies with others who might also benefit from them. The first strategy we're going to talk about is comprehension monitoring. This is when a reader becomes aware of when they don't understand what they've read, and they're able to formulate and know exactly what was causing them that difficulty. If they realize that they cannot articulate what a passage was about or what they're currently reading about, they can then take steps to repair their comprehension before they continue to read. So a guided comprehension model progresses from explicit teaching to independent practice and transfer. It includes monitoring and asking questions. Does this make sense? The entire time the student is reading, they should be pausing and asking, does that make sense? Did that make sense? And then going back to clarify. There is a strategy with a little graphic organizer that I have included on the next slide called the INSERT model, which stands for Interactive Notation to Effective Reading and Thinking, and it provides students with opportunities for reflection. The INSERT model is not the only way to have kids monitor their comprehension. You can see on the left-hand side a little graphic organizer that a teacher has created. It includes the text that students are reading on the left and what they're thinking about and if it's making sense on the right. You can see that the teacher's broken the reading down into very small chunks of the text so that the student understands that they need to be stopping frequently. The next example shows the insert model, which I talked about on the last slide. And it's really there for students to annotate or mark up what they're reading. This version's pretty simple. It includes a check mark for when a student's already knows what they've read, a minus sign when it's something they didn't know, a question mark when they don't understand, and a plus sign when they've learned something new. But if you Google search comprehension monitoring posters, you're going to find lots and lots of cute ones that include other symbols, things like an exclamation point when it's something that surprises the reader, an asterisk when it's something that they think is important, maybe a heart when it's something that they really enjoyed when they read, and so on. Marking up a text is a very helpful, proven comprehension monitoring tool. The last example is a checklist of self-questioning. You can happily use this one that I took from the Building RTI website, or you can make your own. You can see it's just a series of questions to get students thinking about if they really understand what they've read. The next strategy we'll talk about is question generation. Question generating is a reading strategy that is taught to students to help them engage with the text. It helps them clarify what they've read and get a better understanding. Asking good questions is a way for students to monitor their own comprehension while they read. A lot of times we find that struggling readers approach reading as a passive experience. They read the words with the expectation that the meaning of the text will just suddenly reveal itself if they just keep reading enough words. On the other hand, good readers challenge the text by asking questions as they read. They might ask themselves, why did they just say that? Or what do they mean by that? Or I wonder what they were doing here. Maybe they ask, why am I reading this? When kids are taught to ask those questions while they read, they can learn to increase their comprehension through the process and by thinking about the answers to the questions that they've generated. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of different questioning. I'm going to start with this leveled questioning. This is the technique or verbiage that I used in my middle school ELA classroom for many years. Teaching kids the types of questions they need to generate needs to be explicitly taught and practiced. In my classroom, students were asked to generate a level 1, 2, or 3 question for just about every single thing that we read. And you can see here that level 1 are the facts. You can find them in the book. Things like, what did the dad look like? Or where was the little boy when he lost his kite? A level 2 question are those inferencing questions, things that you have to read between the lines to find. Things like, was the beach nice or not? Was the teacher a caring person? It's not going to come out and tell you, but you can find the answers if you have read carefully and read between the lines. A level 3 question is something that you won't find the answer to in the book. Things that include feelings. How would it make you feel if you were in a situation like the character? Or what were some things that the boy could have done differently when he lost his kite? Another common question generating technique is deep and shallow questions, or sometimes called thick and thin questions. And you can see here that typically we find this in the younger grades. And our deep or thick questions are things that make us think and help us understand the deeper meaning of what we read. They usually start with words like why or how. And our thin or shallow questions, on the other hand, are the questions that we can find the answers to right in our book. They usually start with words like where, what, when, and who. The last questioning technique that I have added here for you is the QAR method. QAR stands for question answer relationship. And this method aligns pretty closely with my tried and true favorite, the leveled questions, but it adds the think and search questions, which takes those sort of right there questions and brings them to the next level. These questions include things like summarizing or explaining. They make the reader go back into the book and actually read for a series of pages or paragraphs to kind of conclude what they've read without just finding something, one quick answer. Our next reading comprehension strategy is summarizing. Summarizing teaches students how to discern the most important ideas in a text, how to ignore irrelevant information, and how to integrate the central ideas in a meaningful way. Summarizing teaches students to understand what the important parts are. It enables students to focus on key words and phrases, and it teaches students how to take a large selection of text and reduce it to the main points for more concise understanding. My favorite summarizing technique is the somebody wanted but so then technique. This is when we basically read something and then we discover who the somebody is, what they wanted, but is their problem. So what do they do to solve that problem? And then how does the story end, or what is the conclusion? You can see an example. The big bad wolf wanted pigs for dinner, but they hid in the brick house, so he went hungry. And you can use this technique all the way up through very difficult high school texts. This is a great way to look at problems and solutions. Another method of summarizing is the $2 summary. This is a great exit ticket as you're leaving a classroom. This is when you assign each word is worth 10 cents and you ask your students to write a $2 summary. So for every word is worth 10 cents, you can do the math. This can be scaffolded by giving students specific words that are related to the learning that they just talked about. And it can be increased to any amount of money. So this is a really fun one. Our last summarizing technique is the Dear So-and-so method. This is when you ask the students to write a letter to an absent student or a teacher or whoever makes sense that day. And in the letter, they need to tell the person that they're writing to what the point of the lesson was or what that person missed that day. The last strategy that's proven to be effective is story structure and understanding story structure. Since young readers are mostly reading narrative texts, it's essential to introduce them to story structure and the concepts of the beginning, middle, and end, as well as character, setting, and plot. As each book is read, you can ask students to identify what's the problem in the beginning. Next, you can ask them what the actions are that the characters took in the middle of the story to overcome that problem. And finally, you want them to be able to tell you what the solution to the problem is. As students learn the story structure, they'll be able to make those connections and start applying that structure in their minds as they read. Working with story structure over and over again is one of those things that really never gets old, since no two stories are exactly the same. Of course, we know many stories follow a similar path or a similar structure, but we can use the graphic organizers to help kids learn how to make those connections on their own and hopefully gain comprehension by following those paths and making their own connections. Over the next few slides, I'm going to show you some examples, probably very familiar examples for you, of some graphic organizers that we can use to help students understand typical story structures and how they can create them themselves. These are examples of story maps. We would find these probably in our lower grades. They break stories down into simple parts that usually include a beginning, middle, and end. The next is our story skeleton, or our bare bones story map. It's a lot like our story map that we just looked at, but we know that kids love something a little silly or unusual. So just another way of looking at it that's a little bit fun. The last, but certainly not least, to be used in all grade levels for all sorts of stories, is our traditional plot diagram. A lot of times we see this represented with a mountain or a roller coaster ride, but being somewhat of a purist, I always use the graphic organizer seen on the bottom right down there. It includes everything that you could possibly need to be able to make a clear picture of what you just read. In summary, we know that teaching students reading strategies is effective, and we know that they should be taught. We know that reading strategies are different than reading skills. We want to use strategies that help kids apply what they're reading about, not answering specific questions about text. And a lot of studies have been done about reading strategies. Some strategies are studied more than others. We do not deem one strategy superior to another, but we have more data for some of them, and we're confident that they work. Some of the tried and true proven strategies are comprehension monitoring, question generating, summarizing, and story structure. If you have any questions or you would like to reach out to me, you can contact me anytime. My name is Emily Killian, and my email is killiane@cliu.org. Thank you so much for coming today. I appreciate your time.